Just ahead on One Detroit. 1 year after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, we'll take you to a Southfield school that's educating a large number of Ukrainian student refugees. Plus, Reverend Horace Sheffield III reminisces on his father's leadership in the civil rights and labor movements. Also coming up, the Detroit Symphony Orchestra salutes the classical music contributions of African-American composers and musicians. And we'll have some suggestions on what you can do this weekend in Metro Detroit. It's all coming up next on One Detroit.
From Delta faucets to Behr paint, Masco Corporation is proud to deliver products that enhance the way consumers all over the world experience and enjoy their living spaces. Masco, serving Michigan communities since 1929. Support for this program is provided by the Cynthia and Edsel Ford Fund for Journalism at Detroit Public TV, the Kresge Foundation.
The DTE Foundation is a proud sponsor of Detroit Public TV, among the state's largest foundations committed to Michigan-focused giving. We support organizations that are doing exceptional work in our state. Visit dtefoundation.com to learn more.
Nissan Foundation, and viewers like you.
Just ahead on this week's One Detroit. Social activist Reverend Horace Sheffield III talks about how his life's work was shaped by his father's leadership in the civil rights movement. Plus, we'll get a preview of the Detroit Symphony Orchestra's Classical Roots concert from this year's conductor, Nazir McFadden. And One Detroit contributor Cecelia Sharpe offers some ideas on things to do in Metro Detroit this weekend and beyond. But first up, February 24th marks 1 year since Russia invaded Ukraine. Millions of refugees have left the war-torn nation for other countries. Hundreds of the refugee families landed in Michigan, and many have enrolled their children in the Manoogian School in Southfield. One Detroit senior producer Bill Kubota has more on the common bond between the Ukrainian student refugees and the school's large Armenian population.
It's so hard and complicated when you're familiar with the situation, when you see every day people tears, when people don't have the place to live, when they don't know how to survive, I mean.
Liliana Masnitska, she left Ukraine after the Russians invaded Crimea in 2014. She got out with her children, but not much else.
That's why I probably work now with refugees, because I know how hard to get some paperwork, how to get medical insurance, how to apply for your work authorization.
A lot of things that we have to do, such as Social Security office, driver's license that we have to help them get. It takes time, and we're working to, overcome these barriers and these bureaucratic stops to understand this all new for everybody.
Like when you move to new house and you don't have furniture, you don't have food, you don't have nothing.
Just calm them down, they will come, we will help, and just help translate and help them get acclimated to the customs.
In Metro Detroit, Masnitska says Samaritas has more than 600 case files for Ukrainians resettling here after the more recent Russian attacks. The Manoogian School in Southfield has been taking in a lot of refugee students.
The first group of students who landed here, it was a heartbreaking story, of course.
The AGBU Alex and Marie Manoogian School, a K-12, started in 1969.
We were a private Armenian school up until 27 years ago, when the school was transformed to a charter school, which opened its doors to the community at large.
Some of that community at large, Ukrainians. Ukrainian students have been here for some time, but the thinking was, why not recruit some more?
We knew we had a pocket of Ukrainian students, and from a marketing perspective, this is last February.
The school targeted the east side, Hamtramck, Warren, where many Ukrainian families live. But then,
Russia has launched a large-scale military attack on a number of Ukrainian cities.
By March, a surge of Ukrainian students, not from the east side, but Ukraine itself. More than 100 new arrivals, part of a total student body of 450. The school's at capacity.
They like to go fishing.
We have faculty member, our senior ESL teacher, who is well known in the Ukrainian community. She became the first point of contact.
English, they all know that without English they cannot function here. So that's the main goal. And yes, we are trying, we are doing our best. It goes, I think it's pretty good.
And adverb means adding to the verb, right?
The school's added 3 more ESL teachers.
Our hearts go out to the Ukrainian situation right now. Any war. Armenians have experienced war for centuries.
And if there's anybody that would throw their doors wide open to these students because of our history, it's going to be this school.
History: Armenians migrated to Ukraine centuries ago. Early last century, the Armenian genocide, the mass starvation of Ukrainians a decade and a half later, more recently new bloodshed, the 2020 war involving Azerbaijan and the majority Armenian Republic of Artsakh.
It correlates the Armenian experience with Artsakh, yes. So they can relate to it with our history, and the teachers do talk about it, the Armenian teachers do talk about it, as well as the classroom teachers.
Today, Ruslan Kucherepa worries about his cousin in the war zone.
People die there, and he's still alive now, but it is harder here in Donetsk.
Are you keeping in contact?
My grandmother and grandpa try to keep contact.
My grandma is in Ukraine. I trying to call her every day if I have a chance, and she thinks that in Ternopil, it's like west part of Ukraine, everything is good, but there are a lot of sirens, and planes. Yeah, it's really hard for me because I love her so much, and I don't know. I'm trying to communicate with them every day so they feel like that I'm with them. So.
Because we are small, we are capable of talking and making sure that their mental stability, talking to parents, sometimes asking questions, and if we feel and notice something is not. Because a lot of these fathers are still in Ukraine. And moms are here, some families have been split, and the kids go through awful times.
Now, we don't know if these students will stay here forever, for a few years, a few months, we don't know. But honestly, we don't care. We will do our best to accommodate them under the circumstances that we're in right now.
The generation of our kids, it's our Ukrainian future. I mean, it's like the new generation of our country. How we call in Ukrainian, it's our new flowers.
Try to say in English, Ilya.
But I understand that better they stay in warm house, better they have what to eat. They gonna be know good English when they come back to Ukraine. It's like a huge opportunity for refugee kids, but it's like a huge obstacles for their parents, because I was like the same shoes and I know how it's complicated.
February is Black History Month, a time to recognize the contributions and achievements of African Americans. Reverend Horace Sheffield III, Executive Director of the Detroit Association of Black Organizations, sat down with One Detroit contributor Satori Shakur to reflect on the legacy of his father and his own experiences growing up during the Civil Rights Movement.
So Horace,
yes.
What was it like to grow up in such a legacy of civil rights and social justice?
Yeah. Well, to be honest, at a very early age, I kind of engaged in an epistemological, encounter with God, saying, why would you put me in this context? To sleep in Dr. King's home, to know every formidable Black leader there was in and out of my house.
Like who, for example?
Roy Wilkins, Whitney Young, Martin Luther King, knew Harry Belafonte, Godfrey Dillard. I mean, you name the Nipsey Russell. I mean, these people be in my basement with my dad. I mean, they were there because beyond whatever their professional commitment was, they were trying to make life better for other folks. I knew that God had placed me there to absorb as much as I could.
You were there with the architects and designers. So can you share a little bit about how?
Well, my dad started in the labor movement. So he was vice president of the Negro American Labor Council in the 40s and 50s under A. Philip Randolph. Baird Rustin was his compatriot. The two of them staffed the March on Washington for Jobs in the war industry. So it was not only civil rights, but it was the labor movement, and TULC was at the hub of that, which is where King and everyone came. My dad took me everywhere. Yolanda King, who was my dear friend, we had a theatrical company, Dr. King's daughter, they didn't get to go. They were afraid for their lives and harm, but my dad took me. I went to planning meetings. In maybe 62 or maybe 64, we went to Baltimore, Maryland for the Negro American Labor Council. Dr. King was at that convention, and while we were there, an African American was run over by a tractor in downtown Baltimore, integrating a skilled trade site. And so all of the people at the convention, all the black trade unionists from all the unions, maybe 1,000 plus people plus folks in the community marched downtown to the site. And when we got there, Dr. King was only like 5'4", 5'5". He wasn't a tall fella, at all. They had a reef, and they wanted to hang this reef on the fence. And Dr. King webbed his fingers and hoisted me up to put that reef on the fence. But one of the lessons I learned from that was, for the next 2 days in the convention, I kept telling my dad, when I grow up, I want to be a black leader. That's one of the most salient experiences that I've had.
And did your dad, like Dr. King and others, did he have a target on his back?
Oh, yeah.
And even knowing that, and knowing what happens to certain leaders, you still wanted to lead.
There was an incident when he and Charles Evers and Aaron Henry, who was president of Mississippi, NAACP, where they actually surrounded by the Klan. I mean, it was harrowing. I mean, we as children would get calls. My mother would bring us in and tell us that we had to pray for my dad because they didn't even know if he was going to come home.
Back.
But that's when you know you're really committed. When you
it must have been scary, though, as a kid.
It was scary for me. I mean, I love my dad. He was like my best friend. I worked with him till the day he died. But at the same time, he always explained, why he was doing what he was doing and why he was where he was going.
What's missing in our relationships with each other, with our city, with our world, that we're not moving forward?
I will say to you that having gone through the civil rights movement and having a draft card and, the whole social upheaval behind the war in Vietnam, that I really think where we are right now is potentially worse than any of that. Look, we have people now who want to usurp the Constitution, care nothing about democracy, the principles and precepts upon which this government was founded, just to maintain power because they know in 25 years, whites will be in the minority. And that's what frightens me because I think the closer we get to a multicultural society and one that recognizes that all people are really the same, the more dangerous it becomes and the more threatened they are. The positive note is if enough good people, if enough people of conscience, which is what Dr. King said, whites and blacks, gays and straights come together and recognize that, the principles and the precepts upon which this government was founded, liberty and justice for all, and actually embrace that. I'm encouraged that there's enough people who feel differently. We just got to get them to act differently, and then we can rid ourselves of this curse. The vast majority of people I know want to live in harmony and peace with one another. They just don't want to be shut out and excluded and discriminated against based on sexual preference, color of their skin, zip codes they live in, or anything else. So, I mean, that's how I see it. And I may be wrong. I always choose to see it as half full, not half empty. And I believe, as Dr. King did, in the innate goodness of people. And I think we've got to appeal to that and do the best we can to make it happen.
The Detroit Symphony Orchestra's 45th annual Classical Roots concert next month will celebrate the works of African-American composers and musicians. The performance is being led by the DSO's newly appointed assistant conductor and community ambassador, Nazir McFadden. One Detroit contributor, Cecelia Sharpe, caught up with McFadden to learn more about the concert and to get a lesson on conducting.
Really exciting. Okay, Miss C. Sharpe, welcome to your conducting lesson.
All right.
When we're conducting, we should always be thinking of a plane, a big square. Never come out of this square. So we'll learn the first step, a proper ictus. And we're gonna bounce our baton. 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Now we're gonna learn a pattern of 4. Most songs start in 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Perfect.
I'm so glad that you are here in Detroit with us as the assistant conductor of the Detroit Symphony Orchestra. As an audience member, we see the conductor waving their hands. You're waving.
I love this, waving your hands.
Yes.
Scooping the air.
Scooping the air. But what is the job of the conductor?
Well, funny or not, the main job is to wave your hands and to scoop the air.
Scoop the air, okay.
But there is something deeper than that, than just scooping the air and moving within the wind. You're in charge of the time, the tempo, the rhythm, the heartbeat of the orchestra. The musicians are some of the best musicians in the world. They know how to play their instruments incredibly well. They know the music. So what can you give them other than just beating time? It's not just about waving your hands, but also about how you shape the sound, how you shape the music, play softer or louder, sharper accents or more legato. It's so much deeper than just that too. It's about how you inspire the musicians to react to the music. They already know what's happening next. How do you get them ready for it? How do you get the audience ready for it so that they're sitting on the edge of their seats? It's about shaping the sound and creating an atmosphere. That's what the role as the conductor is on the podium.
So you're preparing for this year's upcoming Classical Roots concert. Nazir, what's on the program for this year's concert?
Well, we have a very exciting program. Of course, with every start of the Classical Roots program, we start with Lift Every Voice, played by the DSO and sung by the Brazil Denard Chorale. Next in the program, we have a piece that I'm really excited for because I get to collaborate with my former clarinet teacher and clarinet idol. I love his playing, Anthony McGill, who is the principal clarinetist of the New York Philharmonic. And we'll be performing Anthony Davis' You Have the Right to Remain Silent, which is a concerto for clarinet and orchestra that was written based off an encounter that Anthony Davis had with the police. And it's a really powerful piece for clarinet and orchestra. And in the piece, Anthony Davis writes that the clarinet improvises on top of the orchestra, so I think the audiences will find this really exciting to hear what Anthony McGill comes up with on the spot. We also have Florence Price Concert Overture No. 2, which will be the first time the DSO performs this piece. We'll also be collaborating with bass baritone Devon Tynes, who is a wonderful singer, and he'll be singing Sermon No. 1, which is he devised this work to incorporate 3 different musical pieces into one. And in between each movement, there will be a poem, 2 recited by Devon Tynes, and 1 will have Detroit native and poet Jessica Care-Moore joining us. And I'm so excited for this program. I think our audiences will truly be amazed with what we've come up with.
That sounds like an incredible program, Nazir, and we're looking forward to seeing you conduct the Detroit Symphony Orchestra for this year's Classical Roots concert. What is the mission of Classical Roots, and why is it so important to keep that mission of Classical Roots alive?
Well, first, the mission of Classical Roots is to uplift the voices of marginalized communities, but specifically the African American community. We're performing works by African American composers. The reason why we continue to do these concerts is to introduce this theme of African American art and music to our communities. It's very important that we continue the trend of diversity within our orchestras and in our orchestra programming. It's really important for young African American musicians to see that they too can do it, that they too belong on the orchestra stage.
How do you hope that the performance impacts the audience with this year's Classical Roots concert?
First, I should say, this is the first Classical Roots concert since the pandemic. So I think it's the perfect chance for our audience members to hear for the first time in almost 3 years what the orchestra sounds like playing music by African American composers. I hope that our audience members will be able to see themselves in the music, to relate to the music more so than other composers. I pray that the audience members will enjoy the music as much as I do, as much as the musicians on stage do, and that they are willing to come back to Orchestra Hall to see the DSO or to see myself.
And the Classical Roots concert takes place on March 3rd and 4th at Detroit's Orchestra Hall. Now, let's take a look at some of the other events and activities in the Detroit area this weekend and beyond. Here's Cecelia Sharpe of WRCJ 90.9 FM with today's One Detroit Weekend.
Hi, I'm C. Sharpe with 90.9 WRCJ. Here are some fun things happening in and around the Detroit area over the weekend and beyond for you to check out. Now through Saturday at Orchestra Hall, Maestro Yadar Benyamini conducts Rimsky-Korsakov's arrangement of Night on Bald Mountain by Mussorgsky, Grieg's Concerto for Piano and Orchestra, and Symphony in F Sharp Minor by Dora Pajachevich, featuring renowned pianist Alexander Gavriluk. Also happening at the DSO on Friday at 8 p.m., Detroit's Urban Art Orchestra presents An Evening of Legends, directed by Kresge Artist Fellow Deshaun Jones. This group will present vibrant, original arrangements of music by artists M.F. Doom, Jay Dilla, Q-Tip, and Pharrell Williams. Detroit rappers on the rise Frankie P., Amber Shane, and the Mona Lisa will also perform as special guests. The fun continues on Saturday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., where the Detroit Historical Museum will be hosting an event called On the Shoulders of Giants, highlighting the legacy of Black entrepreneurship in the city. You can shop from local vendors and learn more about Detroit's exceptional entrepreneurs by visiting the Hustle, Fixers, Helpers, and Caregivers exhibition. On Sunday, swing by the Detroit Institute of Art's Beard Mural to enjoy an immersive performance from the Detroit Chamber Winds and Strings Structurally Sound concert series. The concert's theme is Detroit Renaissance and will feature DSO trombonist Kenneth Tompkins, new compositions by Jeff Scott and Maurice Drawn, and poetry by Kalima Johnson. And on Tuesday, the 28th, soak in the sounds of big band jazz music. Come on by Aretha's Jazz Cafe at Music Hall to hear the Scott Gwinnell Jazz Orchestra play at 7 p.m. There's always so much to do around the city. Here's more of what's happening ahead. Hope to see you around. a great weekend.
That will do it for this week's One Detroit. Thanks for watching. Head to the One Detroit website for all the stories we're working on, follow us on social media, and sign up for our weekly newsletter.
From Delta faucets to Behr paint, Masco Corporation is proud to deliver products that enhance the way consumers all over the world experience and enjoy their living spaces. Masco, serving Michigan communities since 1929. Support for this program is provided by the Cynthia and Edsel Ford Fund for Journalism at Detroit Public TV, the Kresge Foundation.
The DTE Foundation is a proud sponsor of Detroit Public TV, among the state's largest foundations committed to Michigan-focused giving. We support organizations that are doing exceptional work in our state. Visit dtefoundation.com to learn more.
Nissan Foundation, and viewers like you.